What's going on, everybody? It is that time again. The Sooners Illustrated Podcast, episode 128 on this Thursday, November 14th, 2024. Josh Callaway, Collin Kennedy with you on a bye week Thursday. Get away from just this season for a weekend is nice. But we do have some stuff we want to talk about. As always, of course, with you on a Thursday. Oklahoma's 2025 recruiting class. A lot of people are asking, are they going to be able to keep it together after this disastrous season? The right guy to ask right here, Collin Kennedy. We will get into that. Brent Venables, unwavering confidence per President Joe Harroz earlier this week. Oklahoma standing behind their head coach moving into 2025. We'll dissect those comments. Is it the right move? We'll get into all that, of course, as well. And why not? We'll peek in on the offensive coordinator search also here in the midst of the bye, as that end of the season is coming up. They're going to need to make a hire here in just a few weeks. And of course, James E. Jackson will be along at the back end for a little in-state recruiting roundup as well. So a very nice, packed Thursday show for you in the middle of the bye week. But CK, we'll start with the recruiting element. Like I said, no better person to ask than yourself. You had a great piece of VIP content earlier this week where you went through all the 25, 26, and even 27 commits for Oklahoma and basically did a little quick hitter on where things kind of stand with each guy. Now, obviously, we're not going to go through every single guy right here. That's going to be reserved for our VIP members. Great reason to become a VIP member of Sooners Illustrated. You get great intel like that. That was a great catch-up on just kind of where things are at with every guy. But in general, Collin, I mean, what's your sense of this 2025 class? I mean, a lot of fans are asking, it's been a rough year. 5-5 is not what anybody had expected, especially in the offensive end. It's been so ugly and hard to watch at times. In your mind, what's kind of the general vibe of this 25 group in that Oklahoma is going to be able to keep it together, with still signing day a few weeks away?
Yeah, I think Oklahoma's got pretty decent reason to be optimistic right now about this group in 2025. Yeah. I think that in general, a lot of these guys, as I was going through trying to make sure that I've got the latest on each situation, a lot of them, very simply put, see this as an opportunity. They chose Oklahoma for more than just the on-field product, and they want to help get the program to return to what it's supposed to be on the field. Mm-hmm. While also obviously working with the coaches that they committed to, the people they committed to, the program, what it offers. I think Oklahoma is actually sitting in a pretty decent spot down the stretch here with the early signing period just over the horizon. Now, the key will be obviously the unknowns. There's still time left, unfortunately, in this season. And with that comes various opportunities for other programs to try and, maybe squeeze a late visit in there.
Yeah.
At least have those guys hear their pitch out until pen actually hits paper. And so in general, just because you have reason to believe you're going to be able to sign all these guys in the current moment doesn't actually mean that it's going to be the similar case in the long term. It is about maintaining that belief, though, and making sure that's going to be the case. And I think Oklahoma staff has done a really good job of continuing to strengthen those relationships at a time where they really do need to be fortified. But yeah, I think just going through and combing through every name and individual player in this 25 cycle and even beyond, OU is in good shape before the early signing period. And I think what Oklahoma should also find a little bit of confidence in as well is Oklahoma's not the only program out there on the recruiting trail struggling on the field, yet still seemingly able to build success in the recruiting aspect. You've seen Auburn continue to garner momentum, even though things aren't going well for the Tigers either. There's a list of so on and so forth that you could bring up here, but recruiting and the on-field stuff we talk about a lot on this show, it doesn't always depend upon each other. You often hope that what you're doing on the recruiting side can help redirect what's actually taking place whenever you're playing games. And I think in Oklahoma's case, these guys that are committed in 2025, they take a lot of pride in the program they're committed to and want to help it return to the greatness that they see in it.
So let me ask you this, because I'm sure a lot of fans are curious, in your mind, how much does it depend on the offensive end with the staff, right? Because, I
Yeah.
mean, defensively, I think there's a lot of reason to, I mean, Brent Venables is going to be here. The defensive staff is going to, assumedly largely stay in place, and they're performing well if you want to loop in that on-field stuff on the defensive end. There's a lot of reasons to be optimistic, and if you're a defensive player, say, yeah, I still want to be a part of this. Offensively, obviously, it's been rough, but there's also a lot of fluidity with what coaches are actually going to be here. How much of that is an element to this on the offensive side of things for those guys? Because you would think, I mean, hard to blame anyone if you're kind of sitting there wondering, like, is my position coach going to be there? Who's the OC going to be? How much, a lot of it on the offensive side of the equation is just going to be dependent on what the staff actually looks like whenever, this all ends up shaking out with the new OC and the ripple effects from there.
Yeah, and I don't mean this in any demeaning way, but one of the quickest ways I can tell if someone actually understands what they're talking about in recruiting is if they buy into the concept that players commit to places, not people.
Sure.
You are committing to those coaches that you want to play for. You can have all the bells and whistles in a program. It can have all the history and tradition. But at the end of the day, these guys are making a long-term decision based upon the people they want to be surrounded by.
Sure.
They're trying to look at that situation. Who is going to tailor me to the best of my ability and help me reach my ultimate goals? I think a lot of this has to do with who's on that offensive staff long-term. Like, for example, really the only position group in the 2025 class right now on the defensive side that I think is even a slightest bit concerned about is like defensive back. And I think that that's only really because of the numbers there, right? I mean, far and away the most defensive pledges. So that's why you have guys like Cortland Guillory popping up on the radar because Texas is hovering there, but also he's one of several defensive back pledges. Amarian Robinson, Arkansas is throwing the kitchen sink at that guy down the stretch. But that's only two of several DBs, right?
Sure.
On the offensive side, though, completely different storyline. Michael Fasusi talks about, I want to play for the best offensive line coach in college football. I want to be developed by Bill Bedenbaugh. All those receivers are basically under, to varying degrees, some level of concern watch because Emmett Jones was a big reason why they all committed to Oklahoma. I mean, he is an elite recruiter.
Yeah.
And when you go down the list, it's like Marcus Harris committed almost out of nowhere because of his relationship with Emmett Jones. Cortez Mills, Oklahoma kind of snuck in there and swung things in their favor. The list goes on, right? Emmanuel Choice. Emmett Jones was his first ever offer. I mean,
yeah,
like I know that in a perfect world, everyone wants to hear that recruits in general commit to like their favorite team or their favorite university or college. But man, in almost every phase of life, it's about the people that surround you and how much you believe in them to help you out and further your abilities down the line. And that's what football is now more than ever when it's more transactional than relational. When you do have relationships that also provide some sort of value, it's huge. So I think on the offensive side of the ball, man, it really is going to come down to who stays, who goes, and then who replaces them. And that's a hard truth for some people to hear, but that's recruiting, man. I mean, it's just the nature of the beast. And I think as long as Oklahoma has a decent plan, I think as long as Brent Venables really takes a lot of pride in communicating with these offensive commits and keeping them in the loop as far as who's going, who's coming, what's happening next, obviously they're going to have a decent shot to hold on to a lot of these guys. But man, it is really about that offensive staff, how important they were in collecting all of this talent, and now who's still going to be in place to make sure that the vision that was sold to all these guys is still ultimately what's going to be waiting for them whenever they arrive in Norman.
For sure. You would think just at the very least, your position coach leaves, you have a different one in, you're going to at least reevaluate, kind of take a quick step back and kind of, okay, this new guy who I may not know at all. Maybe they recruited you wherever they were before, but likely you're starting completely clean slate. And kind of like we talked about before with Jaden O'Neal, where he would kind of said, as long as I kind of jive with the new OC, I'm good. But what if he doesn't jive? What if that who knows, right? So it's going to be interesting. Again, I recommend becoming a VIP member. Collin is absolutely all over it. Great catch up over this week. Just kind of went down the list of everyone who you should feel really good about and who you should maybe be a little worried about. It's all there on Oklahoma.247sports.com. On kind of that note, I mean, as far as the class keeping it together, they know their head coach is going to be, or at least it would seem. Now, I don't know if anybody really thought that Brent Venables was going to be let go at the end of the year. Really? Yeah. I mean, it's worth bringing up. We talked about it on the Monday pod with Tom and James because the season has been rough and they're staring at 5-7 in the face, ending one of the longest bowl streaks in the country is in danger of being snapped, obviously, this season. But over this week, Board of Regents meeting on Tuesday, both President Joe Harroz as well as Athletic Director Joe Castiglione stood behind Brent Venables. I want to read their quotes real quick, and then we'll kind of discuss. This was Joe Harroz earlier the week, president of Oklahoma. He said, "It's unwavering right now in his belief of Brent Venables. We know it's been a tough season. I've been around Oklahoma football for a long time. We have the right coach. This is our coach. Obviously, we would have loved to have had some more wins, but our confidence in the coach is as steady as it's ever been." And then there was Joe Castiglione, who kind of went on again to acknowledge the season hasn't been what they hoped, not what they expected. But he said, "That said, we truly believe in Coach Venables and our team. We are completely focused on both supporting them and looking at all the ways to address the needed improvements now as soon as possible, as well in preparation for next year, and work with Coach Venables to help in all of that process." And he went on to say that they have Coach Venables has their full support and all that good stuff. So it would sure seem that Brent Venables is going to be back, barring something shocking. Collin, what was your read of these quotes? And we didn't get to talk to Brent on Wednesday night at a private personal matter, so we haven't talked to Venables since this happened. But I guess just kind of what was your read of what Harroz and Castiglione had to say? Was it the right move to kind of be that, firm and that, it doesn't really, I feel like, help you much to be like, yeah, we don't know about this guy, but I guess just kind of what's your view of it all as Oklahoma gives Brent Venables a vote of confidence here going into what would be year 4 next year?
Look, I'm not reinventing the wheel here when I say this is something you absolutely have to do, no matter how you feel about the situation. And I'm not saying that they feel particularly one way or the other. I'm just saying, in general, this is what you do in the situation. Because whether that's your guy or not, no matter which program you are, especially in Oklahoma's case, you still got to push a recruiting class across the finish line. You got to go out and convince a high-level offensive coordinator to join this program. You got to be able to sell a vision whenever the transfer portal rolls around. And you have to continue to at least keep the mentality of the program intact, at least to the best of your ability, right? Exactly what you mentioned. They're not going to come out and be like, well, I don't know. We'll see. You have to always in this sport reinforce the idea that you know what you're doing. Because the last thing anyone in college football wants to be a part of is a program that has no direction. We can get into the semantics about how people feel about the actual direction of this program. That's an hour and a half long podcast for another day. But I think there's a couple layers to this, and we can dive into this in a number of different angles, but firing Brent Venables right now doesn't make any sense to me. I understand the reasoning that people have, and I'm not dismissing it, but I think Brent Venables on paper is the right guy for this job. I think from a financial standpoint, I put it in a notebook that I had last night. I was talking to people on the phone the last few days, just talking through the situation. And a lot of them were joking like, man, you can that guy. All the money you'd spend on just that move alone would buy you a whole new roster. And it's like,
yeah,
I know you're joking, but yeah, that's the truth. And so I look at it and I say, this was a tough season for Brent Venables, everyone in that program. Injuries, the schedule draw, I mean, so much went into this being a year that I don't think, frankly, anyone could have seen coming. And I think you have to factor that in and then look at this logically and say, can we really send this entire thing into a complete and total rebuild based on something that we just had no control over to a degree? I mean, I think it's the right move. And I think it's the right thing to do in that instance to vocalize support. And Brent, and I'll just be honest, like I'm pulling for Brent Venables. I think he's a great guy. I think that he's one of the most genuine people in college football, and he deserves another opportunity because this was tough. But take all of the feelings out of it as well. It's really hard for, I think, anybody that combs through the numbers and everything like that to sell a vision of we're going to pay this buyout, then we're going to pay all these assistant buyouts, then we're going to go and spend even more money on all these new hires, and then we're going to funnel even more cash into personnel acquisition, which is going to become even more difficult with all this overhaul. Like when you've got all of those different puzzle pieces, it is so hard in this sport to make it all fit together seamlessly with no hiccups. And so when you know that, I think whether they really do mean it or not, and I think that they do, it's absolutely the right thing to do to say that Brent Venables is the head coach at Oklahoma, and we won't be discussing otherwise.
Yeah, no, I agree. Let me preface everything. Obviously, this season is a complete and utter failure. I mean,
it's an eyesore.
There's no argument against that. And obviously, at the end of the day, that falls on the head coach, right? To go 5-5. And like I said, one of the longest bowl streaks is in danger of being ended. They're looking at a 5-7 season if they can't pull an upset in one of these last two games. That being said, there is context, right, to this season. By some metrics, depending on where you look, Oklahoma has played and will play the hardest schedule in college football this year. It's been as bad as it could be, as far as tough as it could be, I guess I should say. They drew the short end of the stick with their SEC schedule. Look at the schedule Texas played this year. Look at the schedule Oklahoma's played this year. All things being equal, Oklahoma might stumble into a 7-5 season with Texas' schedule. And now that's, you get a pass out of Oklahoma. That's still beneath the standard, but it's still a different vibe. Obviously, the injuries are the injuries. The wide receiver room's been in shambles all year. The offensive line, we've talked about at length all season and all this year. Again, he's the head coach. So, a little part of everything goes back to you when you're the head coach of a place like Oklahoma. And he just made a bad OC hire. And we didn't think it was a bad hire at the time. I've said that a bunch of times. I've been very open about that. I didn't think it was a bad hire at the time, but clearly it was, right? It set them back. It didn't work. The offense has been a complete disaster all season. So there is enough little pieces I still feel like, and maybe I'm naive, that with the right OC hire, they can just get healthy somehow. It could get a lot better really quick, And like you said, if you move on from Brent Venables, you are starting totally over with that buyout, and your roster will be gutted. You're going to replace the whole staff essentially in theory, right? You're starting totally over. And I don't know that that's better. I know that there is that sentiment of if it's not working, don't delay the inevitable by another year. I get that. But I think it's worth it to at least kick the can down the road for another year just to give yourself another shot to see if you turn around, because starting over at this point after what looks like it could be a 5-7 season would be really tough. And it's going to take at least a few years for the new guy to be able to have any shot of digging out of it. So I think keeping Brent Venables is the right move. Again, I'm not giving him a pass by any means for what's happened in this season, but there is context to it, and I do think keeping him around is the right move. And like I said on Monday, he can clearly coach. He knows defense as well as anyone. If he were to be let go, he would get a premier defensive coordinator job the next day. I mean, immediately at Alabama or a Georgia or someone of that stature would hire Brent Venables immediately. I mean, that's how well he's thought of. The culture's great. The recruiting well. We just talked about the 25 class. Looks like they're going to be able to keep most of it together pretty well, all things considered, because they all buy into this guy. So there's a lot to like. But obviously, at the end of the day, you got to win games. So I think that this is the right move from President Harroz and Joe Castiglione. Stand by your guy and ride it out. Ride it out and give him a shot to get the OC hire right, and then see where things are.
Yeah, I want to reinforce again. There have been mistakes. Like there have been some damning mistakes. You mentioned the offensive coordinator hire. I thought at the time too, hand up, I think a lot of people, I thought that was going to be a great hire. And I was really excited for Seth. Didn't work out. And you make a large mistake. Hopefully you're able to live and learn from what you've done, considering I thought that the hire of Jeff Lebby, all things considered, pretty good decision by Brent Venables to go get that guy as his first year OC and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
The personnel stuff, it's also very, very fair to criticize some of the roster structure and the status, considering, I mean, Tom wrote a really good story about not only are they really good on defense, they have fixed what was arguably one of their biggest issues a season ago in special teams, and it's been way better this year. They're just awful on one side of the ball. Awful. And when you have that understanding, and then the added context, like you mentioned, when I look forward, and this I think is the other part of this, if Brent Venables has steered the defense in the right direction, I mean, overhauled that unit to the point where they used to be historically awful, and now they are the reason that this team is even remotely competing in games.
Mm-hmm.
He saw the special teams issue, fixed that right away. Doug Deacon was one heck of a hire. I think you got to give this guy the opportunity to fix that offense after losing a guy that he hired in Jeff Lebby, who was a good hire, all things considered. Give that guy an opportunity. Let Brent Venables, who, like you mentioned, everyone's pulling for. I mean, this guy is as genuine as they come, and he's someone who fits Oklahoma's brand. Let that guy go try and fix a mistake or two, get this team healthy, and let him go, basically, if you think about it, one more run at the same exact schedule and really evaluate this thing fairly, because they basically flip all of these games. If you can put a better on-field product together, you make a good offensive coordinator hire, you're not going to probably win 10, but man, you'll at least get back to some sort of competitive standard that was built in. But like I was talking about this with a friend the other day, if you do all of this, you spend all this money just to go through a massive overhaul on staff, on the roster, all that, just to play the same exact daunting schedule to a degree, adding a game against Michigan in there, and you're out a ton of cash, all of this different stuff. How much are you even really setting up your next hire for success to begin with?
Not at all. Yeah.
I don't think one bit there's a chance that guy goes and wins however many games you think Brent Venables can't, right? So I think the next season should really be Brent Venables' opportunity to right some of the wrongs, but then avoid some of the unfortunate conclusions that came to be this season, injuries, what have you. I think it's the right thing to do, and it's tough. I feel really bad for the fans. I want to say this as well. Like Brent Venables, the post-game presser after the Missouri game, first thing he says, I feel awful for our players. I feel awful for the fans. I mean, this is a tough weekend to weekend watch. And I mean, that's coming from guys who are getting paid to go through the drudging. People out there are paying the most expensive ticket, arguably, in college football to watch this. And I feel for them. But sometimes you got to find ways to understand the situation and come together rather than just tear it all down. And I think that's what ultimately Oklahoma will face in 2025.
And look, I feel like, Brent Venables 3 years in has shown an ability to kind of learn from his missteps. He hired Ted Roof to be kind of just a body, to help, not really a DC entitled, but Brent Venables was the DC. He learned from that. It didn't totally work. He made an actual DC hire. It looks to be great. Zach Alley, so far, hard to argue with what he's done. Players love him. Defense is having its best year by far. seemed like he did the great job there. Same thing with special teams, like you said. Had Jay Nunez, were really okay at times. The special teams was a disaster in Lincoln Riley. It was kind of maybe marginally better, but again, made a good hire. Doug Deacon, special teams is a lot better this season. His initial OC hire, Jeff Lebby, seemed to work pretty good. Made a misstep here by keeping it in program, thinking I can just keep everything in place and this will just be plug and play. It didn't work. Yeah. I imagine he'll learn from that in the next hire. And that segues nicely into what we're going to talk about next, which is the offensive coordinator search. So we'll check in here. We're getting close to this happening, right? I mean, Oklahoma LSU is on November 30th. We all kind of feel like the hire will be made pretty quickly thereafter. I mean, signing day is December 4th? I mean, you can't dilly-dally too long. How are things going? I mean, I was kind of checking with you. I mean, obviously, it's been a couple weeks since we talked about the OC search. We brought up some names back then a couple weeks ago. You had some great VIP, again, updates. I'm not going to ask you to go through the whole notebook. That's, again, for our VIP members. But just a little check-in from you on how you feel like Oklahoma is positioning themselves. And maybe if you want to get into any names, feel free as far as just, I guess as this search starts to take shape a little bit more as we get a little closer to this thing actually happening in, expected few weeks or so. It's a massive hire. And as we said a bunch of times, he's going to define this Venables era and the direction of the program moving forward. A lot of it kind of hinges on this hire. So where are things kind of at for you with it right now?
Yeah, I'm going to kick the names conversation can down the road a little bit here because I want to get into a big picture conversation here as well with you because I want to hear your thoughts on some of this as well. I think we have known the weight that this decision carries for a while. But now, does anything change after losing that Missouri game, the way that it looked, the conversations that surround the program, and some of the other happenings around the country? What to me right now is very interesting is I think the debate that's going on right now, not just in the public sphere, but also behind the scenes, is Oklahoma was once a program or a offensive coordinator position that would always come with a ridiculous amount of leverage.
Mm-hmm.
Are offensive coordinators now holding more leverage over Oklahoma in this instance, considering the way that this thing is going, the situation that currently presents, and obviously what lies ahead, right? Not just the schedule and the personnel change, whatever else that we talked about, but also Brent Venables' outlook and the understanding that whoever is taking this job is going to be well aware of the fact that they have to save Brent as well. I don't know. I want to hear your thoughts on this, but I think talking to a lot of people over the last couple of weeks, like Oklahoma is going to have to sell itself as much as some of these coordinators might have to Oklahoma. And I don't know that that's ever necessarily been the case before.
Sure.
At least that I can remember. I mean, Oklahoma has always been a place to be if you're an offensive mind. I mean, how many OCs have gone on to get big-time head coaching opportunities? How many OCs have had elite talents, premier players of the quarterback position, so on and so forth? I think right now, what I find interesting is the university president and athletic director are having to go out publicly and give a vote of confidence in the head coach. Oklahoma is going to miss bowl eligibility for the first time in 25 seasons. You have to think that the important thing here is the early signing period is December 4th through the 6th. The transfer portal opens up on December the 9th, if I remember correctly. So if they don't make a hire before the early signing period, you probably at least have to have that dude in the books before the portal window opens up a few days afterwards. But a lot of the coordinator names that we'll get into here in a second, they might be playing bowl games with a lot of their guys,
even potentially
playoff games way down the line, right? And so I think what I have found relatively interesting is that we have always known that this offensive coordinator hire was important. But now it's getting tricky. Because, I mean, we haven't even touched on the fact that all this is going on. And I talked to someone the other day, not necessarily expected to be like a turnover-heavy head coaching window either, which suddenly places maybe a little bit more value on those offensive coordinators.
Yeah.
Florida State's in the hunt. A few other programs are probably going to be in the same boat. This thing's getting not only more important, which we've known, but it's getting even more tricky as the days go on, seemingly. And curious to hear your thoughts if Oklahoma's now kind of fighting a unique situation, but I think that is at least a conversation to be had as they inevitably come to a decision on who the next hire is going to be.
No, I do question the attractiveness of the job because, I mean, at face value, you would think, yeah, I mean, slam dunk. It's Oklahoma. First off, you have a 5-star quarterback in place that hopefully you could convince to stay, in theory, right? You got a great staff. You can pick and choose who you want to keep. And, you know, you have offensive line coach that is one of the most highly regarded in the sport. Emma Jones is crushing on the receiver end of it. You know, a place like Oklahoma, you go in and you perform for a season or two, you're going to get a head coaching job. I mean, you will. I mean, you saw that with Jeff Levy got an SEC head coaching job. I mean, it'll happen for you. If you go perform, it will happen for you. So on that end of it, I would think it'd be very attractive. But like you said, the other part of the equation, Brent Venables, while he got the vote of confidence, his seat is warm. I mean, it's warming at the very least, going into year 4 for him. And the offense is a mess. It's broken. You got your work cut out for you. It's horrible right now. I mean, it's in shambles, right? They can't do much of anything well, and there's a lot of question marks at a lot of positions and a lot of health concerns. And then on the flip side of that quarterback thing is, there is a 5-star quarterback in place that hopefully, you can maybe keep. What if you don't? Do you have one that you're going to bring with you? You're going to roll with Michael Hawkins? Kevin Sperry's a true freshman? I mean, what's the quarterback situation? You're going to have to portal one? I mean, it becomes up in the air very quickly.
And this is the other thing, too, that I think has to be brought up. Do you want him? I mean, when with what was just put on tape, this is what I'm trying to hammer home. As the season goes on and weeks continue, what's being put on tape right now is tough. Like, do you a week ago? I said this on the board with our subscribers. We were having the VIP chat. A week ago, I was like, any offensive coordinator in the country probably wants Jackson Arnold in their room. I mean, for lack of a better phrase, he fumbled away the season not even a few days ago.
Yeah.
It
was bad. We talked about it on Monday. It was really bad. And not just, obviously, the raw talent, arm talent, he can run around. That's all there. But what do you do when your quarterback is making the wrong reads all the time? What do you do when he's fleeing the pocket because he's got happy feet because he's been sacked 800 times? Those are harder things to fix. So, I mean, that's a valid question, too. I mean, there's a lot of question marks on this offense. We talked about it, just me and you chatting yesterday. This wide receiver room, how many of those guys are going to be back? I mean, if they're all back, great. That'd be awesome. But are they? I mean, I don't know. I mean, from both a health perspective and then a portal perspective, a draft perspective, maybe for a couple of them. I mean, there's a lot of questions with that big 5 as far as, I mean, any one of them could be back, but they all certainly could be gone as well. I mean, I don't know, right? I mean, who knows it right now? Offensive line, what's that group going to look like? Tight end room probably needs another makeover, so running back room, is kind of, is Marco Murray, what's the situation there? Is he going to be back on this team with a new OC? If not, you're probably starting over there, I mean, so I mean, there's a lot to be kind of, with the offense. I don't know if it's that attractive for a lot of OCs. I think you're fighting a bit of a battle there for sure, especially when there's other big openings, like you said, like Florida State. I know they've had a horrible year. They got one win, but there's maybe a little more stability there. I don't know. I can't speak to that as much, but we'll see, I guess.
I don't know, man. I mean, it's, and I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here.
No, it's
I do think that it's a conversation that's being had out there. whether people want to admit it. I mean, like, as we kind of transition into who or the what, like, I think now a very real part of this offensive coordinator search is the likelihood of being able to bring a quarterback with you.
Mm-hmm.
I firmly believe that. What does that tell you? I mean, and like, how many times do people around the program want to talk about how clearly you cannot rebuild an offensive line through the transfer portal? Well, man, you got one heck of an offensive line signee class coming in 2025. Not a lot of those guys ready to play. That's just, I mean, your 5-star is a 5-star because he's one of the freakiest balls of clay we've ever seen at the offensive tackle spot. He's only been playing the game a few years. Like,
right.
You're going to have to rebuild this offensive line through the portal, whether you want to admit it or not. How many of those guys leave? I don't know. The receiver, all that. So DeMarco Murray, speaking of the conversation we had earlier about committing to people, DeMarco Murray leaves Oklahoma in that running back room. I mean, like, Taylor Tatum views DeMarco Murray as family. I'm not speculating. I'm just saying, like,
Sure.
DeMarco Murray,
No, I mean, yeah.
They don't give that guy a lot of flowers for his recruiting prowess, but like Jonathan Hatton, big reason why he committed to Oklahoma. And that guy, obviously, he's like one of my favorite running backs of all time that I've covered. He committed because DeMarco Murray is like his guy. Taylor Tatum, DeMarco Murray was a big selling point. I mean, the list goes on and on. Long story short, man, yeah, it's the situation just gets murkier, it feels like, as we keep going. And I don't think that is going to change because Bama and LSU, I mean, you're staring down the barrel of, man, that's going to be some stuff to comb over if you're a coordinator trying to figure out this position. So anyway, I just feel like it's something to think about. Like, they got to make this hire around the portal, and I don't think they have to make it necessarily before the early signing period. I know some people will really want that done. I still feel like, if anything, you would make the hire after the early signing period to push this group across the finish line with some form of continuity still in place. And then you have the coordinator available whenever you got to go sell guys that'll probably start for you next year on his vision. Yeah, I mean, it's a really tricky situation, and it's getting trickier is basically the message that I wanted to present.
You would think that with the time that when they did it, with obviously letting Seth go middle of the season, you have all this time. You would think that they would be able to move pretty quick after the season is over.
Yeah,
maybe that's too simple thinking, but you've had all this time. Hopefully, you can kind of do an agent, reach out to their agent type of thing, and then once the season's over, boom, make this happen pretty quick. You would think.
And I think that has happened. I'm from what I can gather to this point. I think that there have at least obviously been feelers. I mean, we all know kind of how this stuff goes in this sport. I mean, like, I was on the phone the other day with somebody, and it's like, dude, if like your personnel department hasn't watched every single group of 5-starter, you're behind the 8 ball for the transfer portal window in December. Like, that's just how this stuff goes. So yeah, like they've probably zeroed in on particular guys, and I'll talk about that here in a second. But yeah, they got to move quick. They got to time it up right, though, because again, like, it gets weird with not only their season, but then the other seasons that are going on. I mean, a lot of variables. So
yeah,
fascinating to
feel free to throw.
about.
Yeah, you want to throw out some names. I mean, we did this a couple of weeks ago. You brought up Andy Colton-Nicky with Penn State. I brought up Joe Craddock with Tulane. I still feel like Craddock is a top candidate. I do wonder, and this is based off nothing. I'm not a Florida State insider. I wonder if Florida State would be interested. That seems like a natural fit
I think
there. So that worries me for that. And again, like, to do the quarterback thing we talked about a couple weeks ago, Darian Mensah, exciting young quarterback. No telling if he will portal if you could get him, but if you could, that'd be great, which is a big attractive part of the Joe Craddock conversation. Are there names for you that are starting to rise toward, okay, this feels like a very real candidate, or anybody you want to just throw out there as far as still feel like they're in the mix, at least, with a few weeks to go?
Yeah. So if you're a subscriber to us, Sooners Illustrated, obviously appreciate y'all being part of the site right now with everything that's going on. We're doing our best to keep you guys in the loop. And I encourage folks out there that want to come join us. Come join us. Our board is awesome. We've got great members. But last night, I put together a little intel package on the coordinator opening and all that.
Mm-hmm.
I think Joe Craddock is going to build up a lot of leverage this offseason, man. Florida State, I think, is going to be interested in him. I think he's going to be interested in Florida State.
Yeah.
I think another thing that you bring up that is very interesting, obviously everyone out there is talking about, well, if you get Joe Craddock, maybe you can get Darian Mensah. I don't know if Darian Mensah is like a foregone conclusion, and I think that adds another layer to this. I really do believe, as I mentioned earlier, that a lot of value is going to be placed on the ability to potentially bring a quarterback with you via the portal. That's why I don't think I got to talk about him much last time, but like a guy like Ben Arbuckle is very interesting to me. Kind of comes from the air raid tree, worked with Zach Kitley, who's the offensive coordinator at Texas Tech, was the OC at WKU when Bailey Zappi was balling. I mean, think about that job. He was part of that staff. Arbuckle now at Washington State. Washington State, this is something no one is talking about. Washington State's like 8-1 right now, Josh.
Yeah.
They could finish the year like 11-1.
It was a jump scare when the playoff rankings came out, and I admittedly did. I don't know if I totally realized that they were having that kind of year. I was like, whoa, look at this.
They're rolling. And Arbuckle has a lot to do with that. So does John Mateer. John Mateer is their quarterback at Washington State. I believe he's a redshirt sophomore from Little Elm, Texas. Not too far, right? Not too far at all. So if we talk about the Joe Craddock, Darian Mensah hypothetical a lot, I think that there is a lot of value in a guy like Ben Arbuckle, who is from the state of Texas, was a high school coach in the state of Texas, younger guy, is now finding a lot of success, could potentially bring a quarterback with him. Obviously, there's a lot of speculation and just storyline stuff, so take it with a grain of salt. But Ben Arbuckle, I think Jake Spavital continues to be a very interesting name because I think Jake Spavital is quite literally helping Dave Aranda save his job. I mean, not even a few weeks ago when I was out at coaching conventions in the summer here in the state of Texas, we were all talking about who do you think might get that Baylor gig at the end of the year? And that's not a conversation anymore, which is wild to think about. And on top of Jake Spavital being who he is right now, as far as a play caller, he's got time spent in the SEC. He's got time being around a lot of high-profile quarterbacks. Texas State, the head coaching stuff did not go well, but it's a resume point. And then Baylor would potentially be another one that maybe Oklahoma looks at Spavital and says, if you can bring a guy like Sawyer Robertson, we will have interest in that as well. And so I still feel like guys like, a Dan Mullen, like, is going to get a phone call.
Isn't that a fun name? Isn't that a fun name to
I still have such a hard time crossing that bridge, but it is crazy to me that he keeps getting brought up. And I know that that's that for a reason. But Dan Mullen would be wild. I mean, just for like the fun of it, it would be nuts if that were to happen.
I mean, that's a clear, like, he's coming in to do like 2 years max and then get a head coaching gig, which if you're Brent Venables, I don't think you can really worry about that. I think whoever you feel like is going to get the offense rolling, like, you don't really need to even worry about, long term. Like 2025 is like your first objective. But
here's what I find interesting about this. Like, when everyone talks about this offensive coordinator opening at Oklahoma is like, okay, you're probably around for 2 years. You're making this hire based on who can win you what? 8 games? 7 games?
Something like that.
The hire is based upon who do you feel has the best ability to go and get you as the head coach of Oklahoma X amount of wins. I don't know what that number is, but interesting layer. I think that's big reason, again, why quarterback stuff is going to come into play. I don't know, man. It's really interesting to try and go through all this, but and there are a few others. Brennan Marion could maybe be an option that brings a quarterback with him as well, whether that's someone at UNLV, the Sluka thing. I mean, who knows? The list goes on and on. I think we're going to drop a 4.0 offensive coordinator hot board this week. So again, reason to subscribe to Sooners Illustrated. We're working on that. Cade Bell was just added to 3.0. Could he bring, I can't even remember if a guy like, I don't know, Eli Holstein has eligibility left. I haven't even looked into that, but so yeah, like that's kind of the read that I think a lot of people get, including myself, is they're going to go hire a guy that is finding a lot of on-field success. I don't know that it's necessarily about like the big picture stuff as much as it is who can come in and help us win right away. A lot of that has to do with the quarterback stuff. And I think that these are building layers that add into, again, a murky picture that is the offensive coordinator search at Oklahoma.
No, for sure. I think I still favor, just for me, I think I still favor Craddock. But I've certainly warmed up to the idea of Ben Arbuckle and Jake Spavital as being perfectly viable options. And again, the quarterback thing, I mean, it's big, whether it's John Mateer at Washington State or Sawyer Robertson at Baylor. I mean, Sawyer Robertson has been one of the more underrated quarterbacks in college football this year. I looked it up just while we were sitting here. Can I interest you in 17 touchdowns and 4 picks, passer rating of 146.6? I mean, that sounds amazing from what we've had this year, the struggles for Jackson and Mike Hawkins. So, I like those ideas, and I don't think that this portal class or quarterback is going to be especially fruitful. At least it doesn't seem like it will be on paper. There's not going to be a ton of big names floating out there. There's not going to be, a Dylan Gabriel level of guy or a Jackson Dart of a couple years ago or whatever. At least it doesn't seem that way. Maybe there would be some surprises. So if you can get a leg up on one of the guys who will be out there potentially, that could be nice. So
for what it's worth, a phone call I had the other day, they were like, I don't think that this December window is going to be all that talented, at least as much as people expect. But I think that also, again, into the idea, you would need assurances because kind of your point on Sawyer Robinson, I was reading an article the other day while I was doing some research. People have like John Mateer as like a top 5 to 7 quarterback in college football right now. This stuff, it carries weight, man. I mean, it's important.
Yeah. Going to be interesting, and we've been talking about it, and we continue to talk about it as the season starts to wind down and we get to finally look ahead to next year. I think everyone's ready for that. And again, subscribe to Sooners Illustrated, Oklahoma.247sports.com. Become a VIP member. You get access to all this. Collin's been all over it on both the recruiting side and the OC search. And again, like you said, another hot board coming up soon, and we'll continue to update as what we're hearing. Names that make sense, that don't, they drop off. You'll be in the know with this search if you subscribe to Sooners Illustrated. I think that's it for this. We're going to have James come on, do a little in-state recruiting talk after signing day for other sports, basically, and also high school football playoffs are coming up, so he's got some stuff he wants to get into on that end. CK, appreciate you as always. Enjoy the bye week, although I know it's not really the bye week because you have a lot of high school playoff action to go cover down there in DFW. But we'll catch up with you next week as we get ready for the Alabama game. Look forward to that.
Texas high school football playoffs are going to save me from what my weekends are right now, which is obviously seeing what we're seeing on Saturdays and then the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, watching what's going on in Arlington. I need Texas high school football more than ever before. So happy best time of the year to the folks that follow the great sport that is TXHSFB. And I will see y'all next week as another game of the season arrives.
Can't wait. All right, let's get James E. Jackson here, a little in-state recruiting roundup right here. All right, we now welcome in James E. Jackson to the program. Comes on Thursday shows as a little in-state recruiting talk. James, playoff football is here this week. Very excited. We're just kind of joking about with Collin just a minute ago. He's excited for Texas high school football playoffs just to kind of cleanse himself of the tough season. Same for us. I'm excited for Some high school football playoffs starting this week all across the state. For you, where does the attention go? Obviously, there's a lot of in-state guys coming to OU. There's a lot of places you could go, but where does the attention lie for you? I guess this week, but also, over the course of the entire playoffs as some guys wind down their high school careers and try to win some championships over the next few weeks.
Yeah, that's the thing. A lot of guys are trying to win their first, and some of the guys that are already OU commits are trying to win their, multiple. They're going after that. So some of those guys from Carl Albert, I'm going to look at those guys and see how they've been doing because they've had phenomenal seasons. I've written plenty of times about their stats. Tristan Haynes, Trinae Washington, guys over there, Marcus James, all those guys over there. But some of the players I want to pay attention to is some I really haven't gotten a chance to get out to more this season who are just offers from OU. Want to see Jacob Graves a little bit more. Booker T. Washington, had a phenomenal year. Really good turnaround year for them. And he's a guy on the defensive line that his first offer was OU. He's played really well. They had some success. Let's see what happens with them. Want to get out there and see them. Want to look at, go down to Washington, Oklahoma. Look at Case Alexander. He's a son of a former OU tight end. Now his brother just went to Iowa. Well, his other brother just went to a different college. Let's say that. And so we'll see what happens with him. But he's had a very great year as well. So there's some guys that I want to see get more in touch with. See how they're feeling. Just going into this postseason. There's so many guys around. Cash Jacobson, who we talked about last week. Katie Jones from the same school. Those guys out there. Just figuring out what's going on with them. It's more fun at this time because it's high level football, high intensity football. All the games really matter, so there's a lot more fun to watch and cover and things like that. And these guys are trying to leave their stamp on their high school programs for years to come.
100%. And it's like you mentioned, the Carl Albert guys who are trying to win again and are the big favorites at their level there in 5A, certainly with obviously a trio of OU commits on the roster. That'll be a lot of attention will lie there and have more than likely several chances to get to see them as they, navigate the playoffs and get ready to try to get back to UCO where the state championship games are. But I agree, this time of year is awesome. And, you see guys, they have offers or whatever, but this is kind of where they really start to, kind of show what they can do. These big games you're playing, sometimes high school football that, you get spread out. You don't play that many very good teams over the course of your regular season, but then you get to the playoffs, obviously, and everyone kind of converges east side, west side, wherever, way up north, way down south, and they start to match up, and you get to see the best of the best play each other in the state. So it's a fun month, and I'm looking forward to it as well, certainly, and should be fun. We'll continue to check in over the next month as we get to see some of these OU guys try to win some championships before they go off to Norman either this winter or next summer. As far as some other in-state stuff, yesterday was signing day for the sports, basically other than football. You saw a lot of baseball guys, a lot of softball players sign, women's hoops, which I know you got out to one in particular that you're going to talk about. Do a little roundup for us there as far as in-state signees on whatever these sports you want to get into. But I know in women's hoops in particular, because you were out there for an exciting player that Jenny Baranchek and that staff is really excited about.
Jenny Baranchek and that staff they've already done a phenomenal job this season. As you see, they're 3-0 and breaking records right now.
School record for points. Not bad.
It's crazy what they've done. But they're looking on to the future as well at the same time. Because Zaya Lofton, who's a composite 5-star guard and a 4-star guard for us, has just been, committed to this program for 2 years now. It just, she finally got a chance to put the pen to paper, got to talk to her, and she's one of those players that you really got to pay attention to. She's ranked number 2 in the state behind Keeley Parks as of right now, and she's won back-to-back, Class 4A state championships. She was, her and, Zaya Van, who was on OU right now,
who's making an immediate impact,
were two of the guards that came to this school, and they had no girls basketball or girls sports, any type of titles. And they won it in their first chances getting to the playoffs, things like that. It's been back-to-back. She's going after her 3rd this year. So just a very good story. Got to see, kind of Bo put on that high school career. She has another year to go, but just getting to see her and her family and talk to them once again, it was really good for her as well. And you talked about it. Around the state, there was a lot of people that really, made their impact and got to sign their national letters of intent. And Alyssa Parker, who we've mentioned plenty of times, got to put her ink to paper. She's going to be a pitcher for OU softball, which that's a big thing in this state. So it was really good to see that as well, because she, like I said earlier, like in a podcast earlier, she's probably going to be the greatest woman athlete out of Pecola, like out of in their history, because of the things she's done on the softball and on the basketball court. Like, she's been phenomenal for them in both sports, led them to state championships in both sports, and a couple of state runner-ups in fast pitch as well. So it's just like she's done a really good job. She's going to be one of those most versatile athletes, which what Patty Gasso said in her statement when she signed. She's one of the most versatile athletes out there, and I think that's the truth, and she's going to be that.
I'll throw in too, since we're doing it, a couple of baseball guys that I've had the pleasure of seeing in person myself. A couple of Eli Ramirez from Duncan.
Yep.
Got to see him last year. He signed with Oklahoma yesterday. He's an outfielder who's really dynamic, really good athlete. He can pitch also, though. He's got a big arm. So he's going to be a two-way guy coming to Oklahoma. Really exciting player. Got to see him only once last year, but it was in the state title game, and he made an impact. He's a fun player and one to really be excited about. And then the other Eli Willis, who is obviously the younger brother of Jackson, son of Reggie, former OU player who's on the coaching staff now, has totally revolutionized their offense since he joined the staff under Skip Johnson. Also, Jackson Willits going into year 2, expected to be a major piece of the team again, like he was as a true freshman. His other brother Eli is looked at as a bona fide pro baseball player who probably does not need to go to college if he didn't want.
Yeah.
But everything I've been told is he's dead set on playing for his dad and playing with his brother at Oklahoma. And if that's the case, that's big time for OU, because this kid is legit. And obviously in college baseball, you have to play at least 3 years.
Yep.
So if he comes OU, you're getting at least 3 seasons of him, which is wildly exciting because he's a stud. So and he's from Fort Cobb Broxton's.
Yeah, I've covered them. Yeah, after their state championship runs, I got to see both brothers play, and they're really phenomenal players. I really got to see Jackson a lot more than Eli, because I'm like getting to see him come up and seeing what he's done now on this OU program is not surprising, because of what he did in those state title games. In baseball, it's so hard. I mean, like with Aaron Judge, guys like that, it's hard to be timely in this sport, especially when everybody's going against you. And he was doing that. So it's no surprise to me that he's this good right now.
For sure. All the pressure on him. And it's funny because when OU went to the College World Series in 2022, obviously Jackson and Eli both were not on the team yet. Eli wasn't even in high school yet, I don't think. Or if he was maybe a freshman. But they were there. They were around. It's late June, so school's out. They were there, and they would take BP with the team and do some fielding drills with the team and stuff like that. And they belonged. They belonged with the college guys, and obviously not just any team, but a national runner-up team that year in OU. And they would get in the batter's box, and the ding off their bat was as loud as anyone's. And so it was like, man, these kids are legit. And so far, Jackson, 1 year in, has been awesome, and more of the same expected for Eli as he signed yesterday. Pretty cool. All right, I think that's it. No game preview, obviously, this week because there's no game. We're going to enjoy the bye week and take a weekend off from this, and then we'll be back next week. Obviously, Monday, the Sooners Illustrated podcast, James, myself, and Tom Green. We'll loop in, kind of hit the latest with the bye week, whatever else is kind of going on, and get you all ready for OU and Alabama next Saturday in Norman. And then, of course, Collin on Thursday, back to the regular schedule, game preview Friday, all that stuff that you have, I think, got the drill down by now as we go into game 11 next week. I think that's it for Collin Kennedy earlier, James D. Jackson. I'm Josh Callaway signing off for now. We'll see you next time right back here on the Sooners Illustrated podcast.